Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the final program of the 2022 Tippie Women Summit. My name is Barbara Thomas, and I'm the Executive Director of Alumni and Constituent Engagement here at the Tippie College of Business. So this has been an active month for us. We have brought you a total of 4 different events as a part of the Tippie Women Summit. But guess what? We are not going to stop there, people. We're going to keep them coming. So one, I do want to remind you that all of our programs, all of them are on the college's YouTube page. And I'm going to make sure that that information is in the link or in the chat. But in addition, I want to make sure that you're aware about 2 special career webinars that are coming up soon. So next Wednesday on April 6th, we will present a program on making the most of your performance review. Now, this program will be helpful for both employers and employees alike. And then on May 25th, our program will be on navigating the career pivot, 5 steps to consider when making a change. Now, this is a timely topic as we come out of the pandemic, as there are many people who are pondering a career change, and this webinar promises to provide insight, ideas, and hopefully some inspiration. Each of these 2 programs feature the expertise of Tippie's Graduate Management Program's Career Services Office. They also take place over the noon hour, and I will include a link in the chat so that you can register. And please feel free to share that information with a friend, a coworker, anyone who else might be interested. So before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. We have enabled the live transcription service offered by Zoom for our hearing impaired guests. And if you don't want to see those words that are coming up across the bottom of your screen, you can change that. All you have to do is go to the live transcription button at the bottom, click the little caret beside it, and choose hide subtitles. It also gives you the opportunity to increase the size of those under subtitle settings if you'd like to do so. Now, the one thing to remember, these are auto-generated subtitles, so they might write something a little funky, and they are only in English. Now, throughout our event, you can submit questions to us, and we encourage you to use the Q&A button at the bottom as well. Now, you do see the chat, and a lot of times people love to use the chat. We do want to make sure that you know that you only have 2 options in the chat in a webinar. You can choose to send a chat to the host and all participants, the people that you see right here, or you can choose to send a chat to everyone. So just make sure you kind of know which you're choosing when you do so. And again, remember, all of our webinars are uploaded onto the college's YouTube page. And so if you want to explore other topics like the Great Resignation or other insights on things like the state of the macro economy, you can do that on our YouTube page. So today it's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists and our moderator today. I'll start off with Cheryl Davenport, who is proudly wearing that Hawkeye Tiger Hawk right there. We all love that. So Cheryl is a 2005 Tippie alum who studied economics with minors in Spanish and German and earned an international business certificate. She began her career working for a consulting company, the Monitor Group in Chicago, before earning her MBA at Stanford. Then Cheryl joined Nike, where she has held several roles in their corporate strategy team, most recently as Senior Director, Head of Strategy and Chief of Staff for Nike North America. We are happy to announce that Cheryl has moved into a new role at Nike and is now the Vice President of Consumer Creation and Strategy. Or as she described it to me, she is the head of strategy across innovation, design, and product merchandising for Nike, Converse, and Jordan brands. Thanks for being here, Cheryl. Next, I'd like to introduce Kim Johnson. So Kim is the Vice President of Marketing at Igor and joined the company's leadership team in 2018. Her career in marketing and client services includes work for for a boutique market research firm with large clients like Tyson Foods, Nestle, and Bush Brothers. LED's magazine recently named Kim to their inaugural 40 Under 40 class. Congrats, Kim. Kim did graduate from the University of Iowa's full-time MBA program with an emphasis on marketing. And again, Kim, thank you for being a part of this. Next, we move to Ann Parmley. Now, Ann is a familiar face in the Iowa corridor from her 18 years in a variety of leadership positions at Pearson, the world's leading learning company. She stepped away from Pearson in 2021 to pursue new opportunities. But this girl is always busy. She is the president of the Linn County Gaming Association and has served on numerous boards, including Kirkwood Community College's Foundation, Cedar Rapids Metro Area Economic Alliance, and Unity Point Health. She earned her MBA from the University of Iowa and was named one of the Corridor Business Journal's 250 most influential people of the corridor in 2022. Thanks for joining us, Ann. And our last panelist today is Yvette Taylor. Now, Yvette has served as the Senior Vice President within the Wealth Management Business Unit at Northern Trust since 2013. Her current role is that of National Manager of Northern's Client Support Services Group for Wealth Management. During her 23-year career with Northern Trust, she has served on a number of different committees and advisory boards. She currently co-chairs the Women in Leadership Development Forum and is the former board chair of a nonprofit that is focusing on providing holistic development solutions for at-risk young women in Chicago. She received her MBA from the University of Iowa and serves on the Tippie Advisory Board. Thanks so much for being here, Yvette. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, it is our moderator, Beth Livingston. Now, Beth is an assistant professor of management and entrepreneurship at the University of Iowa, and she is also the faculty director of the Kathleen Dore-Henry B. Tippie Women's Leadership Program. Beth and several academic partners recently were awarded a grant that will focus on supervising the future of remote work, that will focus on supervisor and worker well-being. She received her PhD from the University of Florida and is passionate about studying gender, stereotyping, discrimination, and the management of work and family. She is the co-author of a soon-to-be-released book entitled Shared Sisterhood: How to Take Collective Action for Racial and Gender Equity at Work. And with that, we will begin our program, and I will turn this over to Beth. Take it away, Beth.
Thank you, Barb. I always love being introduced. I feel better about myself after every introduction. It's the best feeling of the day. So I'm going to take that feeling with me through the rest of my afternoon and thank all of you. Thank you for being here today. I cannot wait to bring you this amazing panel. We had a wonderful meeting a few weeks ago, and I wish all of you could have been there to watch our pre-meeting because it was that full of wonderful tips and thoughts and stories. And I hope all of you can find something to take away from our meeting here today. And so we're going to jump right into questions. Please do feel free to use the Q&A function or the chat function to ask questions throughout, and I will get started with some questions we have. And also shout out to everyone out there who is watching via Watch Party. I know we have folks in Iowa City with Jen, and Amy is in Des Moines. Thank you all for joining us today. So the first question I'm going to ask our panel is, what role do you think networking has had in your career success? We talk about networking a lot. It's a word we hear. But what do you think, what role do you think it's had in your career success? Anne, if you would like to start.
Thanks, Beth. I thought about this question before we got together today, and I wrote in all caps, everything, because I believe that networking has led to a lot of my, almost all of my opportunities. I made a list of the jobs I've had post-graduation, and every single one, except for the first, was I came to those opportunities through networking, through contacts I had made. So I believe that networking has been part of my life before I even knew what the term meant. and has led to my opportunities. I'll talk specifically about Pearson, for example. It was colleagues that I had met in prior jobs that created the opportunity to get into the door at Pearson at a time where they weren't hiring externally very often. And that led to a significant career. And I was able then to leverage my network to actually hire people to work for me at Pearson, including one of my co-students in the EMBA program, who was one of my favorite employees. I watched how good she was in the classroom and decided to offer her a job, and she's still there today. So networking has been everything for me.
I love that idea that you start as a spoke and you become a hub, right? The idea of networking, that you connect, that you become a connector among people. Kim, would you like to tell us a little bit about the role of networking in your career?
Yeah, and I think Anne described something that I've just started to put to words in my own mind. Networking helps with the up, down, and sideways parts of your role. So my current role really was a direct result of networking. It was from one of my best friends that I met in the Iowa MBA program, had this connection to somebody who worked at Igor. And when I was building my career in Chicago, I started, through that connection, I started doing some consulting for them on the side, eventually leading to them recruiting me to come to Des Moines and help lead their marketing team, building it from bottom up. And so that's that idea of, a sideways, peer helping me network into my current role. And then, leadership, helping the leaders I've kept in touch with, helping with elevating that role. And then, as Anne said, hiring can come from networking as well. I do really try to make sure that there's public opportunity to apply, because you never know where there's hidden talent. But certainly having a friend endorse somebody as a rock star A+ player led to really one of my most fantastic hires, and really building what I believe is like an amazing marketing team at Igor filled with A+ people. So I think it's really important, and increasingly I try to make sure that I not only leverage my network for hiring, but I do allow for some public opportunity to come in as well, so I don't miss anybody ultimately from that might be some hidden talent.
I love that tension, right? The idea that that networks can be incredibly important for understanding, for gathering information about people, because we don't have all the information, but there are absolutely things that you should continue to question yourself about as you're using networks for hiring or promotion purposes. But I love that thought that there was this component of the Iowa MBA that brought you.
I have to give a shout out to that. That's really probably a direct reason that I'm in the role I am today.
And, I love that, because I do think we often don't go into these situations thinking I am purposefully networking right now, but those relationships and authentic connections that you've built have provided that foundation for you years later, which is wonderful. Yvette, would you like to tell us a little bit about the role of networking in your career?
It's interesting, because I think I was focused on the career success portion of that question. And I think about my career and why I've been so successful. So we talk about, landing the job, right? So a lot of times we think about networking in terms of landing the job, but then once you get there, you still have to build a brand. You still have to get things done. You still have to build consensus and gather information. And in the last few roles that I've held with Northern, change management was a big part of, and leading transformation is a big part of what I do. And I could not have, yes, the team that I have is important, right? So that's part of my network in building consensus. Maybe there are other people that I've connected with through other activities or projects that I've worked on. And now you need to leverage, I've had to continue those relationships, and I'm able to call on those relationships when it's time to move things forward, when it's time to build consensus or lead change or things that I've become known for that are positive towards my brand. I attribute all of that success to having the right internal network in this particular instance in order to move things forward. So, I think my comment would be, as I think about my career success, there's the people that I know that have helped me get in the door. And then there's the people that have helped me get things done once I'm in the door. And that's really important as you think about building your career and having that type of success.
I love that, because when you do, and I want us to delve into that a little bit more here, perhaps subsequently, because this idea of networks serving different purposes and perhaps being built or leveraged for different purposes, I think is really important, that networking isn't just one thing that you do one time and then you have your network and there it is, that it serves different functions and it's built in different ways, which I hope we can build on here in just a moment. But first, I want to ask Cheryl about the role of networking in her career.
I could not more wholeheartedly agree with what each of the panelists have said. For me, networking is both, it's relationship building and then nurturing those relationships by contributing into them and then extracting value from them over time. And my network definitely it builds on what the other folks have said. It has helped me access new opportunities and be connected to opportunities that I would have never even known about in the past. Like I never imagined I would live in Portland and work at Nike, but it has also helped me to be successful in those particular opportunities because I go out to my network and I ask for advice and I ask for support all the time. That's particularly been true in the last few years where I both had a lot of different roles in my work, but I've also had a lot of different roles in my life. I have young children and I'm accessing my network and accessing support and advice and love to say, how do I be successful in this moment in time? And how do I make all these things come together? And that community of supporters that I have over time and that I've nurtured over time has been absolutely critical.
I want to probe that a little bit more. And as we move into hopefully discussing how you decide who you want to network with, like how do you approach people, how do you build those things? You said something really interesting there, Cheryl, that perhaps you all can keep in mind and talk about a little bit more here, which is the idea that you're both feeding or serving your network, but you're also extracting things from your network, that there's this give and take. And I fear sometimes the way we talk about networking is quite one-sided. It's very transactional. I am building a network to get ahead in my career. And we don't always think about the relationship side of that. And so as I'm asking you about how you all have actually done the work to build your network, if you could think about that, the moments, like you said there, Cheryl, where you have felt like you were taking a lot from your network and the times you felt in your career you could give back to it, to emphasize that would be great. Because I do think that I mentioned tensions before. I do think there's a tension there and particularly for young professionals, which is, do I feel like I'm taking advantage? There are people, do they know I'm grateful for these things? How do I build those sorts of relationships? And so maybe perhaps we could start with you, Cheryl, about this question, which is just how have you gone about building your career? How have you decided, well, here's someone I want to network with, here's someone I want to connect with, and how have you started that process?
Yeah. So first I might say, there could be an image in folks' mind of networking as, being at some awkward happy hour, figuring out who you're going to walk up to and awkwardly introduce yourself to, and then try to exchange business cards or something like that. Yes, those things do happen, but that's not what I think of as networking. I really think of networking as relationship building. And that means giving thought to who can you learn from, who can you help, and who might be willing and able to help you. And that starts, most immediately with the individuals that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Your immediate network is, who are you in class with? Who are you working on projects with? Who are you volunteering with? And how can you be known for who you are among that group and cultivate mutual respect and a just desire to want to spend time together and help each other out? That's how I think of it, first of all. That's networking to me. And the strongest relationships I have are people I've crossed paths with at different points in time in my work or my life. And that might be, I was on the Young Alumni Board. I think of them as a really strong network. That might be folks I shared an office with in my first job and we were in the trenches together. It's 15 years have passed since then, but we're still in a relationship and we still help each other out. I do try to give a lot of thought to the diversity of my network and how do I learn and ask for help and contribute help to people who are like me in some ways and different than me in many ways. So I think of that I think that's really important because it can change the perspective that I receive and then the perspective I give. And that takes all different forms. Talking to folks who are younger than me, more advanced in their career than me, meeting and taking advice or being exposed to opportunity from folks who have a similar career or a really different career, or all dimensions of diversity. Are they different race than me, different gender identity than me, different sexual orientation from me? All of those things can help me gain perspective about how I'm growing myself in my career and just how I'm showing up on the day-to-day. The final filter is just where do we have a great vibe? When I reach out and ask for someone like, hey, can you make an introduction for me? Or I'm struggling with this issue. Would you mind going for a walk with me and talking to me about it? I just reflect on those moments and say, did I really take energy and offer energy to that interaction? And if so, naturally, we'll both want to repeat it. So the long answer, Beth, is it's in a lot of ways organic, but with a fair amount of intention of how do I surround myself with people who I can add value to, they can add value to me, and we reflect a big cross section of humanity.
I love that. It's authenticity with intention, right? And I love
Yes, that's a great summary.
Yeah, that you are intentionally seeking people out. I also love the 3 points, folks in the audience, the who can I learn from, who can I help, and who is able and willing to help me. I think those are wonderful tips to take away from. I'm like mentally taking notes of everything, which I think is great. And, there was a question in the chat, and as we move on, because I want to ask Yvette this question, and the reason I bring this question from the chat in now, Yvette, because we had this conversation before about introversion and how you do that. And I was wondering, do you think now you could speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I saw the question pop up and I was itching to get at it. So I'm glad you.
Good. Yes, I'm here to provide it to you.
So I share this with the group in our pre-call. I'm married to someone, we just joked with him about this last night. My son is on this path to be my 14-year-old first job, may have an opportunity to be a caddy. And some advice that was given to him was about, don't just stand there with the members of the club, engage with them and talk to them. Take tips from your father, right? Who is a natural introvert who makes friends wherever he goes and etc. And I'm a little bit more laid back. I might be an observer initially. And years ago, I probably would easily have described myself as an introvert. And I think sometimes networking gets the same negative connotation that the word sales does, right? That you have to maybe be a little pushy, maybe be inauthentic, someone you're not. And those things can be a part of it too. But I think for me, a self-described natural introvert, I would say it's also easier to network when you do think about the relationship building aspect of it. When you think of finding that common denominator that allows you to say, Cheryl, I really, identify with the points you just made about networking, and tell me more about how you carved out time to be more authentic or more intentional in your networking. And I think sometimes as you meet people and you find just those normal, common conversational things, it takes away some of the negative connotation that can make us feel uncomfortable with things that are actually completely normal when you think about it, just a simple relationship building. So that's how it's, helped me. And I think about, people that I've worked with before, that I've developed a great relationship, and we just keep those relationships going. Those are part of my network. People who maybe they're within my organization, maybe they've moved on to different organizations, people I went to school with. When you start to change the focus of what you're doing, everything doesn't have to be, meet at a bar and work a room to build a network. And I think if we kind of take that out of our mindset, it makes it much more authentic, much more organic, and easier for people who identify with being an introvert.
I think that's a really good point, because I do think there is a fear and anxiety around networking, that word. And I do think it's because people tend to associate it with, let's all go to this networking event and walk in and we will like rub elbows and you'll walk out with what used to be business cards or what have you now. Like we'll walk out and we'll have those connections. And I like what both Cheryl and you said, which is these are at their core relationships you're building. And with whom do you want to build a relationship with? Well, you want to build relationships with people who you can learn from, who you can have conversations with, who you work well with. And in this case, it's just continuing to feed and nurture those relationships and to do them with intention to build outside of that network, which I think is important. Oh, you're muted, Yvette. Sorry.
one more point, one more point to that is, you know, you mentioned this two-way street. As you build the career, if you only think of networking as the way to get something from someone, what you tend to forget is that you have so much to offer someone else. And if you allow yourself to be available as that person that can offer something to someone else because you've built this career, whatever you've accomplished, that relationship building becomes also easier in that sense too.
Yes, and I mean, that's important too. I know we had a wonderful presentation on this sort of imposter syndrome, and you can perhaps feel that you don't have anything to offer, particularly if you're junior in your career. But listening hopefully to folks like, you know, on our panel here today who are not early career folks who have built wonderful, successful careers, who are saying, no, I do want to talk to you. I do want to connect with you, will give you confidence that those relationships are not one-sided. Kim, would you like to share a little bit about how you've decided to build your network? I know you have some really interesting stories about that.
Yeah, and I think maybe this will give hope to introverts out there that there's more ways, and you can be creative with how you network and what you call networking. An example I would bring is that a year or two ago, I sat down, my content manager and I were discussing what events we would do, what speaking opportunities, who was going to go where, trying to piece that puzzle together for the year. And there's a pretty important trade show in our industry that is pretty predominantly male. I'd say 80% of anyone, all the panelists are male. It's just an industry that hasn't had a lot of female penetration. And that's because we're in the building technology space. So some of that's where some of that overlap happens. And I thought, well, why don't I assemble a power group of women in my industry, and we can be one of the first all-female panels at this show that is talking about technology, not just about being women, but actually showing that we know our stuff and providing something of value, of interest to people of all, you know, all genders and backgrounds. So I didn't actually know that many women in this industry. I'm going to be totally honest. I couldn't fill a panel. I was a little embarrassed, but I knew one person really well. I reached out to her, she was in, and then she reached out to someone she knew who reached out to another person. And suddenly there was a group of 5 women. We all had very loose ties previously, but by putting this panel together, I know that I could reach out to any one of them. If I needed a little bit of their time, I've got someone that I can recognize and know at these conferences. And, you know, it was a really collaborative, positive experience. They were all really grateful that I brought them together and we left with stronger bonds. I would call that networking. You know, that's not a happy hour networking. Even as an extrovert, I'm not always very comfortable at happy hour networking either. So, you know, now it's thinking of it as getting creative, and it can also be giving. Right now I'm in a stage where maybe I can give a little bit more than I need to take. So can I, when I see an award for something in my industry, can I think of somebody that I know that would be really cool to nominate them and to see them get recognized for their work? So I also consider that networking in a way as well, because you're trying to help others in promoting their own career and giving them a platform for recognition to build a network also. So I think get creative doesn't have to be just happy hours.
Yeah, and you were able to come together because you shared, you had a shared value and you had a shared goal, right? In terms of female representation in your industry and a goal to do. And I think that sort of thing can be very nice. It's let's not just connect in, you know, our shared situation here as we all like coffee or we all like cocktails, but you can also network around a shared project or, you know, a service project or something in the community as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Anne, would you like to share? I know you also told us some stories and you were talking in the chat a little bit about, you know, or you were talking before with us about, you know, how you approach this with intentionality, which I think is.
Well, I mean, a lot of Cheryl's answer, they're spot on. It's really about that relationship building. And I'm a big E on the ENFP Myers-Briggs, or an EFP on Myers-Briggs. So I have the huge E by my name. And sometimes when that shyness creeps in, I'm wondering where it's coming from, but it still does creep in, especially if you're networking with folks that you just don't know anybody. I think when you get older and you have a big network, you tend to then, you know, walk towards the people you know, and you should actually be breaking that habit because you constantly need to be building relationships. So I won't repeat a lot of what's been said before around building the networks. So I was trying to kind of think about how this is impacting me right now. And I'm in a job transition for the first time in like, I don't know, a million years. I'm not quite that old, but it feels like it. And, so I'm being encouraged to leverage my network. So I feel like I'm on the other side of networking, as well as, being a mentor and coaching people. I'm also looking for that guidance from others right now, using LinkedIn and my prior career contacts. And actually, it's kind of fun because it's like peeling back your family tree, but from a career perspective, because you get to reorient yourself with folks that you've worked with over the years that you haven't maybe seen or thought about in a long time, and you find out what they're doing. And so that's how I'm kind of using networking now, and using that network I've built through all the ways that all the other women have talked about to benefit me right now. So it's creating, I've actually got someone I reached out to network with. I got them a job before they've been able to help me. So, I mean, it's going both ways, and that's been really, really fun. But, to kind of talk about the questions, it's really about relationship building. And I think you said something about values, common values. I think Kim also mentioned that. You're going to find out in these relationships pretty quickly. I think it may have been Cheryl that said vibe, whatever it is that connects you. And if it's uncomfortable and awkward, that's probably not someone you're going to keep close to in your network, because maybe your value systems aren't the same. And they're probably not going to be, an important person part of your network. But if you have those common values and aspirations and interests, that's going to make that relationship easier. So kind of look at the whole person, not just from a career perspective, but are there other things that you guys can connect with around that move the whole relationship forward?
I really appreciate all of these conversations, because I do think there is a lot of anxiety around how I go out and start to build these sorts of networks, and thinking about the fact that, well, we all have a network already. We have people we're connected to already, and it's just being intentional about how we build that. And Lois in the chat, talks about appreciating the comments about not using our networks in an exclusionary way. And I think that's part of the intentionality, which is, not just I'm having these relationships because these are the people who support me and make me feel good about myself, which is an important role of a network, to have people who lift you up and elevate you. But if you are doing, like the question Cheryl said, is who can I learn from? That is an important thing to think about. If you're thinking, well, who's external to my organization? So Yvette's point about her internal networks, like who's external to me that can help me see this problem in a different way? Who is in a community that I've never been a part of, but I want to understand more? And how do I build authentic connections with people, and not just kind of exploitative connections with people to help me build those sort of relationships? But being intentional about it, I think, is the first step. When you look around and you're like, wow, I am not getting any new feedback here, right? I'm not seeing these from different perspectives. I'm kind of treading water a little bit in terms of who I'm talking to. I've found that in my career of, I'm talking to the same people. They're kind of giving me the same advice. Maybe that's because the advice is the best advice, or maybe it's because I'm not talking to the right people. And continuing to ask yourself questions, I think, can be really important. I wanted to ask Anne one more quick question before we move on to our next panel question. There was someone in the chat who talked about as an extrovert, and I'm also an extrovert on the panel. So since you've self-identified, Anne, I'll call on you as well, is, that sometimes we extroverts can get a little excited when we're out with people, a little oversharing, perhaps, a little let's be high self-disclosures about our life to build these relationships very quickly, perhaps, or try to make them more intimate more quickly. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, of times in which perhaps you have managed your natural extroversion in building relationships, or perhaps built relationships with people who were not extroverted, and how that worked for you or not.
I was guilty as charged.
Same. That's why I phrased it.
I think I saw that chat too, and I quickly went to, oh, does she know you? I think as I in my professional career, like how I overshare, I share with very intentional, I pay close attention to the person I'm sharing with. So if they're a new person in my network or a new relationship, and I judge that comfort level, and I will get to the point where probably I overshare with someone, but not until I know that they're comfortable being overshared with. And they may not overshare back with me, but I really watch that. And I think it's important to watch body language, because I think people who don't like to be overshared with, they almost like, you can see them get tense or kind of clench up. And so you know to stop right there, that you've kind of taken it too far. So I've been on the receiving end and probably the giving end of that at times in my life. So I appreciate that comment. I think you just need to really pay attention to the person that you're talking to, and just guard yourself a little bit, take some gradual steps towards the direction of being completely extroverted and kind of out there with someone, until you know exactly where they're going to kind of fall on that spectrum. There was a second part of your question I had thought of an answer for, but I can't remember.
It was just about, how you've navigated that, building a relationship with an introverted person, perhaps. Someone who,
I think somebody else made the comment about the one-on-one coffees and things. I know I can think of, especially in my last role within Pearson, that I was mentoring and coaching young women of a diverse background and personalities. And it was kind of interesting because I got myself really loaded up a little bit but they were all so different. I couldn't even figure out how to not be with any of them, because I enjoyed them so much. And I love the back and forth, because I think I learned just as much from them as they do from me. But it was always one-on-one. Of course, it was during the pandemic, so it was video calls and coffees and things like that. But I could spend all my day just chatting with people. And if it's a person who's just more introverted, I just gauge the conversation around their comfort level.
And I think you make a good point too. And it was a really great, Kelly just summarized your points really great in the chat. But I think also as an extrovert and understanding when my natural exuberance, for instance, might make other people uncomfortable. And I think understanding yourself a little bit is good here, right? Once you've recognized that you're an extrovert and that other people are not that, you've kind of crossed that first step, which is saying, oh, people are going to approach this relationship building in different ways. But one thing I did want to say is, I think if you are high anxiety and extroverted, then you can ruminate over those moments you overshared way too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, I ruined the entire network. It's over, right? In this first conversation, I think I would remember that relationships are not that simplistic, and in many cases, right, these are relationships and networks built over numerous chats, numerous cups of coffee. And so, just dialing it back and gauging other people more quick, differently in subsequent meetings would be good. So don't panic if you've been that oversharer, that you've ruined your chances, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
We have a great question in the Q&A that I wanted to ask our panelists, if that's all right, which is, oh, my lights went off. Hello. Okay. Sustainability, everyone, right? We're working on that. When you're building relationships, do you focus on building strictly professional relationships, or are these authentic relationships more personal relationships? And I think understanding, I would love to hear a little bit from you all of how you've managed this. Are we friends? Are we colleagues? Are we a little of both? And how intentionality and building your networks comes into that. And so any panelists who wants to jump in, otherwise I'll start with someone. Thoughts on that?
I find my strongest network ties are to people where I have some level of friendship beyond just professional. And it doesn't have to be super deep. I don't have to know all the details, but maybe I know that they have 2 kids and their child is a world-class athlete in a particular sport, and you can, inquire. And for me, it's genuine. I find this stuff interesting about people. I like to remember it and ask them when I see them next time. And I think when you've got even a little bit of a personal connection, for me, I feel like those are the most resilient. Those are the ones where if I don't connect for a year and I reach out, there's still going to be a lot of positivity and interest, and they'll remember who you are. And it's not just you briefly met at a conference a few times. So I like having that. It also makes it a little more rewarding for me in my career to feel like I've got a network where there's some level of friendship beyond just the colleague or work colleague, or even people who work at companies that might be competitive to mine. maybe we can put that aside and still have a friendly relationship in some ways when we see each other. So I think that it benefits you, but it's not necessary, and don't put that pressure on to have that. Maybe that's kind of a natural extrovert thing to do. So I know I don't speak for everybody, but that's been my experience.
Other thoughts on that?
I think about your question, and I keep centering on this place of authenticity and the importance of authenticity and relationship building. And sometimes for me, it's important to me to get to know the person a little bit beyond just the professional thing. It doesn't mean we're going to be besties and go out shopping the next week, but there's just something about developing relationships and getting to know the person beyond just the professional box that you see them in. It makes it more authentic. It helps you to be able to connect with people. I think when you're building relationships, it's important to find that least common denominator. And maybe it's a mutual interest in a particular genre of movie or music or whatever it is. So I do think it's important. It makes it easier to connect with them on other things if you're able to connect on the simpler things too. So there's a balance.
And what I like about that is it also says if you are someone who isn't comfortable with a lot of that sort of intimacy, right, in these sort of professional connections, that there are lots of ways to balance building relationships and building a network, that you don't have to be, like you said, best friends with everybody for you to build an authentic connections that you can learn from and you can help other people and who can help you. But when you have those moments where you can share, have these moments of connection outside of whatever professional task you have, then in many cases that can strengthen the network that you're attempting to build.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was going to connect this question to another that just came in the Q&A, which is about the difference between networking, mentoring, and sponsorship. And it relates, I think, to what Yvette was saying around you want to show up in every relationship with a degree of authenticity about who you are as a whole human, not just what job you have today. If I tie that authenticity with the intention of the relationship, I would say I have relationships in my network that are very much blurring the line of, friendship and professional relationship. I have a text group that's pretty active that we call Swoosh Moms. It's like our round corner Swoosh Moms. It's a group of women that are my peers. We are loosely connected at work, and we have intersected at work. And we talk on our text regularly, not only about, hey, did you hear about this thing that happened at work, or were you in this meeting, but also, how are you guys navigating the childcare crisis while having the jobs that we have? And we're very vulnerable and very honest and very real. And so that's very much a blurred professional friendship relationship, because the intention of it is empathy, sometimes co-misery, but it's sort of like mutual peer level support. And what my intention with that is support and be supported. I use that network a little bit differently than I might use some more senior level managers who are much further advanced than I in their career. And my intention with them is to learn about what could be ahead, to give them exposure to my work and my successes, and have them as sponsors and more pure professional mentors. So they may be aware, they're aware that of the stage of life that I'm in, at the stage of career that I'm in, and I'm anchoring my conversations with them more in our work without hiding anything, but it's just a little bit different relationship because I have a different intention.
I like that too. And I'm glad. I was absolutely going to get to Lauren's question about that, because I was like, oh, that's perfect for what we're talking about here. So Cheryl, one step ahead of me on that. And I know we had talked about that as a group. And so perhaps if there's other folks who want to jump in, we've talked about the function of your network being different depending on who you're talking to. And that can be kind of up the chain, folks who have more senior than you, but you all have all talked about having people you're connected to within your same profession, outside of your profession, perhaps in different careers, who have helped connect you with opportunities, or vice versa. Do anybody have any final thoughts on that, about thinking about, networking, the difference between sponsorship, networking, mentoring, all of those words that we use to summarize our relationships?
I think no matter what role they play, they're all a part of your network. You know, your network is your connection, your group of people, and each person plays a different role. So when you think about the topic of intentionality, you know, maybe you have more than one mentor, for example, and a mentor is not the same thing as a sponsor, right? The sponsor is a person wearing your t-shirt in a room that you're not going to be in, who can help move things on your behalf that you couldn't do alone, whether it's your career or something else. You know, the mentor is a person you're going to be a little bit more transparent with, and you will have multiple ones because each one might serve a different piece or leg of your journey. Then there's the peerships, the people that, you know, maybe they're at your same level of experience. You might even be even more transparent with them on certain things. There's different ways that you're going to share. And then of course there's the friendship, and depending on the person, you could have friendships in each one of those segments. But it's important to be intentional about sitting back and thinking, and not just thinking about your network in terms of what your LinkedIn profile looks like, right? It's probably a controversial topic, you know, your friends list. And like if I lost my job tomorrow and I've got all these people in my LinkedIn network, who can I really call on, right? Not just, so it's why the relationship building is important. The authenticity is important. It's, you've got to spend, you know, time with it, and it's hard. And if you have a full-time job, you have to put work into it. So I'm thinking right now, you know, I've got folks that I haven't a touch point with quarterly, and I'm a little late on getting those meetings set up. And I really got to do, so it takes intentionality as it relates to carving out that time and really thinking about the roles that people play. And if you've got gaps, then thinking about, okay, how do I fill those gaps? And maybe there's people in your circle or not in someone else's circle that can help you fill those gaps.
Could I pivot off that a little bit and ask all of you all a question about that before we get to our final question, which is just, are there things companies you've been at have done well to help you to navigate that? Because Yvette, you were talking about, you know, well, the work that it takes to build these relationships. And I know we've talked about making coffee dates and stuff. Is there any example that you've had of companies who have provided that sort of help, or anybody, you know?
There are, of course, formal programs, right?
Yeah, right.
That where you can meet people with common interests and build off of that. You know, I worked for Northern Trust, and it was one of the most interesting things. And it's the third organization I've worked for, but as a junior person working at Northern, there used to be this thing pre-pandemic where people would go to coffee, and you see people meeting in the cafeteria at all times of day, but it was normal, right? It was part of the culture. The culture really supported you networking, to learn about opportunities before they showed up in the job list, and to think about new things or working on projects. So in my case, our corporate culture absolutely supported and promoted that, and still does.
I like that. And that's something I think which is good for those folks in our audience who are in leadership positions to think about, how can I support people building their networks and building relationships aside from formal mentoring assignments, which don't always work the way we would hope them to work, is how can I provide those opportunities, which is great. And so I want to finish up with our panel with one final question. We have great Q&As kind of going on. And, you know, about your strengths, about, you know, advice. And Janelle just wrote a wonderful question in the Q&A that's going to take my thunder here for the question that I was going to have. So we're just going to pivot and use her question instead of the one that I was going to have, because it's so close, which is, you know, what's the best advice you have? Right. My question was, what advice would you give to a more junior you about networking? And I think just in general, what advice would you give to our audience about networking?
I can start.
Anne, please go ahead, Anne.
Jump in. I was gonna, and it's been said before, but that intentional part, I think, because I wasn't a business major in my undergrad, and I didn't really even understand what networking was, and maybe it wasn't really heralded that much back then as it is today. But because of that, I didn't have any intention on building my network. So those days it just happened naturally. And that could lead to a slower career start or uplift. And so I would, if you are conscious of it and you're aware of it, then I would start working on it. It's kind of like saving in your 401k. it's really important, and it's really important to start early. So I would say, don't overthink it. I think you said that earlier. If you feel you had a guffaw in a conversation, it probably isn't even a memory in that person's, I mean, they're juggling a lot of things, and they've probably been there themselves. So I would kind of try as much as you can to put your anxiety to the side and start building those relationships early and often, because it will only grow from there.
Kim?
Yeah, for me, I think LinkedIn has definitely gained in importance since the pandemic hit in particular. And I've been fairly intentional early on about making sure when I'm at a job, I connect with my coworkers on there and colleagues and people I meet. So I've had that touch point, and I follow up with a LinkedIn connection. Usually I get a note in there to remind them where we met. Sometimes you accidentally click the send before you can get it in. But people generally are really accepting of that. And then what I use that when I, for example, was looking for who in my network should I invite to be on this panel, or I'm going to be in this city, maybe I'll just see who's around, who's in Chicago still that I know, and just see if anyone's up, if I have a lunch opening or a time for a coffee. So I have been using that as a pretty good resource, a bank of keeping track of people's successes and cheering people on when they post positive things about their career. And the only other advice I might give is don't be shy if it's been a long time. If you had an actual connection, but it's been a few years, we all are here, we're like, it's 2022, how did this happen? It's been 8 years since I worked at this company, I can't believe it. But I bet you anything, you could reach out to a colleague from there that far out, and they would be thrilled to realize you thought of them. And making sure it's not, of course, it's a collaborative experience and a good experience for both. Make it easy for the person you're reaching out to, kind of arrange it, and don't just ask for a job, but come with just a real openness to re-engaging, or a phone call to re-engage. And I think people are so open, and people really get it that time flies. And, there's just an appreciation that you reached out or are interested in learning more about that person.
I think that's great. I mean, and one of the Q&A questions was what tools do you use to maintain this connection? And Kim, you just covered that perfectly, which is all the tools, right? All the tools, whatever works best for you to maintain a connection. But also don't beat yourself up if you haven't put the work in that Yvette talked about, and just start the work when you can. Yvette?
Never too late.
Yes, exactly. Never too late.
Yeah, I think my response is very similar to Anne's. I would tell my younger self to get started early. It's so much easier if you don't have to build a career on your own, right? You need people to help you navigate. You need sounding boards to help you bounce things off of. If you face a difficult situation or a difficult person, have someone in your network that you can talk through it with. And so for me, it would have been to start a little bit earlier, and also that it's not just walking into a room of people and counting how many business cards you collected at the end of the event or the seminar. I would have told my younger self that it's okay if you only come out with one, because maybe it's the authenticity that matters the most. So.
I love that. And that's also hope for those of you who feel anxious going into those situations, right? Set your terms of success a little and your expectations a little differently so that you can begin, because in order to do this, you always have to begin. And Cheryl, perhaps you'd like to take us home a little bit here with.
I will try. My advice would be to let curiosity be your friend. And that might change the nature of some interactions that you have, the scope of folks that you interact with, and also just kind of lower the anxiety, lower the stakes. So if you think of the way you might kick off a relationship with someone is to say, I'm curious. I'm curious how your career path went. I'm curious how you landed in this role. I'm curious what your role is about. I'm curious what advice you would give me. I'm curious how I could help you, or what perspective I might be able to offer you. That's a really cool way to start a conversation. It's really low stakes. I can't think of a time where I would say no to being invited to that conversation, or where I wouldn't glean something from it. So if you just think about, okay, I can kick off my networking just with pure curiosity. I think it will get you a lot of yeses, a lot of help, and a lot of ways for you to help others also.
I love that, because if you walk away from this or X out of this conversation with any one thing to take away, I think it's, how do I start? By being curious and having an openness to learn about people. Because like you, Cheryl, I've never met someone who's asked me those sort of curious questions that I've walked away from that conversation. So thank you so, so much. And I see Barb is back among us. Has it gone that fast?
It has gone that fast, and there have been people who wish we could even talk longer, but we know the lunch hour is only so long, so.
We need lunch 2 hours.
Lunch 2 hours. I like that idea. Well, I want to thank the people in my network, which includes these women right here, because they stepped up and agreed to participate in this panel discussion. Yes, I remember Cheryl Davenport when she was a student here, homecoming queen that she was. But it's been a pleasure. And actually, like, Kim is a fine example of a newer connection, a newer part of my network through LinkedIn, and a recommendation from Cindy Meese. So it's proof that, you know, one, make sure you connect with each other. Again, in the chat, I put a link to our Tippie Women Summit registration page. Just as a reminder, if you would like to connect with these women, the registration page has a direct link from their name to their LinkedIn page. So please expand your network and connect with all of these participants on LinkedIn. So I really want to thank all of our panelists. And Beth, you are a rock star. Look at this. This is Beth's new book. Don't we all want to kind of sign up? There's the QR
Yes,
code.
I gave a QR code. Look at me using technology in this
Right.
different ways. This is me doing the ask of the network, right? This is the, right, how do you build? And that's been really hard in selling a book. You only sell books by, apparently this is the thing that I've learned, is you have to ask people to do things for you, which is very uncomfortable. I love to help people, but I'm like, hey, would you, but it's very weird, but I really do believe in it. It's very exciting. Harvard Business Review Press has been amazing in bringing this out, and we'll have a number of articles in HBR magazine that come out about it in the fall as well. So if that's more your vibe, but we're super, super excited. And thanks, Barb, for giving me the opportunity to share the screen. So
you bet. I think we're all kind of excited to have that book come out. And remember, when it does come out, you need to make sure you go to your social channels and talk about what a great book Beth has written.
if you like it, be authentic.
But
right?
be authentic about all of that. So again, I want to thank you all. Remember, this has been recorded, and it will be shared on our college's YouTube page. In addition, when this event ends in just a moment, you'll see a quick survey. So we would be grateful if you would just share your thoughts. You can give us a little ranking and give us some ideas on how we can make our events better in the future. So we hope to see you all on our future webinars. And as always, thank you for joining us, and go Hawks.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, panel. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
panel, great discussion.
All right, take care.